So, a little bit of a pivot for me. My name is Michelle Ann Johnson, and up until now, I have been a keynote speaker, I've been an executive coach, I've been doing a lot of things in the corporate world. But I'm really at a place now in my life where it's time for me to come out of the closet as a spiritual teacher, as an intuitive. I have been practicing my form of spirituality now for the last 20 years. And I have built this life that I have now, which is totally, totally authentic to who I am, to my soul blueprint, to my expression on this planet. So I'm coming out of the closet. I'm coming out. Yes, it's time. Okay. And it's really interesting because I'm Gen X. All right. I am pre Oprah, pre Eckhart Tolle, pre The Secret. I was around when that stuff was just starting to come online. So 20 years ago, there were a few people in the spiritual circle, the New Age movement. It was starting to crack open. But when I would share with people my experiences as a mystic, my experiences with my intuition, with my guides, with my angels, all that woo-woo stuff, it was met with a lot of skepticism. People weren't quite ready for it. And so I kind of just didn't really talk about it that much. I'm sure some of you out there can resonate with that, right? You're having these experiences, but man, do I tell people about it? Are people going to think I'm weird? Are people going to think I'm crazy? Are people going to side eye me and think that, I don't know what's going on with her, right? I understand. And so I kind of hid this huge, huge part of myself because I just didn't want to deal with the blowback. But I'm at a place in my life now where I'm getting very, very clear messages that it's time for me to really start embodying, start expressing, start walking in who I am, which is a spiritual teacher. So these videos, this is going to be a series of videos that I'm going to continue doing. This is really just the introduction to give you a flavor of what I'm going to be talking about. And for me, I'm a writer. I come from the performing world. And so whenever I'm writing anything, whether it's a copy for the website or writing the keynote, whatever it is, I need the hook first. Like, what's the hook? What's the theme that's going to tie all of this together? And so I needed the hook for these videos. And for me, it really comes down to emotional self-regulation. How do we process our emotional experience? I feel like this is something that's kind of talked about, but there's a real opportunity for me to share all of my experiences because trust me, I have had a lot of opportunities to work with my emotions over the last 20 years. Just to share a little bit about me, I had a very chaotic, unstable, very difficult, challenging childhood. My mother had a mental illness, and so that caused just a lot of chaos, instability, insecurity. And for the first 18 years of my life, that was, well, even more than that. But, that was my foundation, was all of this chaos and instability and heightened emotions because my mother was bipolar. And I don't mean to stigmatize, bipolar. It is a real mental illness. I also believe that she had a borderline personality disorder. So she just there was a lot going on in my home life. And when there is a lot of emotion happening in your environment, you can deal with it in a lot of different ways. Well, not a lot, but several ways. One way is to match that emotional energy, right? So you become very emotional. The other way is to shut down. And that was the way that I handled it. In my mind, my intent was to be the solid one. Don't worry about me. I don't have emotions. I'm good. Everything is great. And I operated like that for probably the first 30 years of my life. I left home, I went to college, I started working, I did all, the things. I became kind of successful in life, but there was this whole emotional experience that I hadn't yet reckoned with. And so I got to a point in my life where all of this emotional energy had just been building up and building up and building up. It had been expressing itself in ways that were very self-sabotaging, that were not healthy. I didn't understand it. And so I got to a point in my life about 20 years ago where I was like, I got to do something about this. And so over the course of 20 years, I have studied and practiced and just come up with my own process for dealing with emotions, emotional reactions, emotional responses. What happens when you get triggered? How do you deal with painful emotional experiences that happened in your past and they're being triggered in the present moment? How can you heal those emotional experiences? And in the process of healing your emotional experiences, you also begin to transform your consciousness. You also begin to evolve spiritually, because emotions and spirituality are very, very intimately connected. Your emotional internal experience is tied to your spiritual evolution. This is what people ain't talking about. And trust me, I'm very dialed into the spiritual community. I'm listening to all the influencers out there, and I have a lot of favorites that I follow, and I think everyone has their contribution and their niche. But what I'm not seeing in the spiritual community and with spiritual influencers is someone who's really talking about, let's deal with the emotional part of this whole thing, right? I hear people talking about shadow work, but not really going into what does it mean to work with your shadow. And I've just amassed and acquired so many different tools and ways to deal. I got a big toolbox that I want to share with you all, because there are some real tangible ways that you can deal with your emotions, not just in the present, but then go back and heal those memories and those experiences, so that the goal isn't to never have emotions, because we're human beings. We are emotional creatures. We're supposed to have an emotional experience. But here's how I like to look at it. Here's the benefit to doing emotional work and practicing emotional hygiene, as I like to call it. We take showers and we clean everything, but are you cleaning your emotions? Are you cleaning your internal landscape? So I like to think about it in a couple of ways. For people who, I use stories, I use anecdotes, I use analogies. I'm a communicator. That's what I do. So let me just explain the benefit in a couple of different ways. Number one, I call it tending to your garden, right? When I first started this emotional work and I really got in touch with my intuition, which we will get into, but I really got in touch with my intuition. And when I first started doing this work and this idea of tending to your garden, I used my intuition to tune into my internal landscape, my internal emotional landscape. And my internal garden was filled with weeds and rocks, and it just was a mess. It was unruly. It was just, there was no order to it. It just felt overgrown, like it hadn't been tended to. It was just like, ooh, this is what I'm walking in. This is what I am, living in. This is what I am encased in. This kind of chaotic, unruly energy. But then as I started to work with my emotions and started to heal and started to mature, started to evolve spiritually, as I tuned into my garden, my internal emotional landscape. When I tune into it now, it's beautiful. It is like a Garden of Eden. It's like there's water, there's a pond over here, there's a river, I can hear water, there's trees, fruit trees, I can smell the lemon, I can smell the oranges, I can smell the rose bushes. It's just this, there's hummingbirds, there's butterflies, it's just this beautiful garden. And that is a representation of your internal landscape, right? Your emotional experience. And it doesn't matter what you say to people or what you are trying to project to the world your internal landscape is. No, what really matters is what's there. So that's one benefit, is you start to clean up. You start to bring order to, you start to bring beauty and harmony to your internal emotional landscape. And let me tell you, it starts to get reflected in your external reality as well. Your external reality becomes more orderly, more beautiful, more harmonious, because the internal reflects the external and vice versa. Your external reality reflects your internal and vice versa, right? So that's one way to look at the benefit of doing this emotional work. The other benefit, and this is really what I'm seeing in the world, when I look at people, because I'm an executive coach, I have the opportunity to talk to people and have very, very vulnerable conversations about what's really going on. And these are professional folks who are senior leaders and all the things, right? But they're still human. What I find is that most people walking around on the planet are operating in what I call the fear, anger, sadness emotions. Everything is a continuum. This is one of the laws of the universe, is everything is a continuum. There's the law of polarity, right? There's a great book called The Kabbalion, which is it's a great text. It's what The Secret was based on, but it's a very old text that captures certain laws of the universe. One of them is the law of polarity. Everything is polarity. There's hot, there's cold, right? There's light, there's dark. There's love, there's hate. Everything is polarity. Well, your emotions also exist on a continuum or have a polarity as well. And I like to think about it as there's emotional pain on one end of the polarity, and then there's peace on the other. Pain and peace, pain and peace, pain and peace. What I see, and trust me, I was there, is that most humans walking around on the planet are operating on the pain side of the polarity, of the emotional continuum. They're operating from a place of fear, anxiety, worry, mistrust, distrust. There's the anger feelings, frustration, rage, contempt, disgust, the sadness feelings, grief, depression, loss, right? Most people are operating within those frequencies, those emotional frequencies. And for most of my life, I was there as well. So I know what that is. As you start to clean up your emotions, as you start to heal your emotional experiences, you start to move more on the other side of the continuum. Joy, delight, contentment, peace, awe. You start to experience more and more of those positive emotions in your life, to the point where you really can sit with yourself in silence and access a level of peace and joy that you never thought possible. And this is really, I think, what people are looking for. We do a lot of things, right, to try to make ourselves happy. I'm going to make this much money. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to get this partner. I'm going to get this whatever, right? All the things. And it's all, or we say, I will be happy when these things happen, right? We defer our happiness, our joy, our peace for some indeterminate point in the future, when really what we're all seeking is an internal experience of peace, of love, of connection. And I found that the only way to really do that, it's not from external stuff. It's not about acquiring more stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love acquiring stuff. We're going to talk about manifestation later on. I'm a manifesting master, okay? So we're going to talk about manifestation, but we're going to talk about it from the lens of using your emotions. Because let me tell you, you can make all the money in the world, and if you are unhappy, it's not going to make a difference. And guess what? Your emotional experience impacts and influences how you manifest and what you manifest. So emotional hygiene, emotional healing, all of the things, it's tied to every other spiritual principle and practice that you are probably interested in. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it, okay? But again, this is just an introduction, just to give you a flavor of what we're going to be covering. But I'm going to be sharing a lot of, my personal experience with this stuff, a lot of stories that are going to illustrate these principles in a way that you can practice, you can apply, because that's really what I'm all about. I'm a teacher, but I love to teach things in a way that people can really understand, really digest, but most importantly, apply to their lives. And so I'm excited. I want this to be a conversation. Please, as we go along, as you watch my videos, please put questions, comments, your experiences in the comments so we can keep this going. If you have specific questions, please put them in the comments and I will address them in videos, maybe even make a whole video on a question that you have about spirituality, intuition, manifestation. But I really want to hone in on this emotional regulation, self-regulation, emotional healing, emotional processing thing, because that really is the foundation for everything else that comes. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I am so excited to continue this conversation. And until the next time, please be well. Take care.